it's such an interesting thing that we do to ourselves, society has whatever, we do to ourselves is cut off one of our senses. I mean, we don't treat it as a sense, really, like, vision or hearing or being able to speak. It's not exactly perceived that way. But what's going on inside is such guidance, it's such wisdom that if you're able to listen to it, it's like you've added a color to your paint, right?
Soph, I love your new background.
Yes, it's my new house.
Yes, and very exciting that you've made the transition. And I'm so excited to share with you something that a friend sent me. I just got it yesterday. Is a new article from the Scientific American. And it's a long article. It's well written, and I think anybody could make use of it. It doesn't have a lot of technical language, but the gist of what they're saying is that when you give attention to your body sensations, that it improves your mental health, can take you out of depression and that sense of isolation and the, just kind of that depression that descends over people when they're not engaged, in expanding. And that they call it sense foraging, which I love. So rather what we used to do was to go out into and gather herbs and work in the garden, and it would stimulate all of our senses. We'd hear the birds, we'd feel the sun or the rain, and so we would have a sensory rich experience. But post-pandemic, a lot of people have sort of lost touch with that ability to have their senses roam, and that by simply giving attention to your body sensations, you can recover. They call it touring your inner garden, and your inner wildness. And I love that because that's something that, Gay and I have been focusing on for, 40 years. So here's the science again supporting us. So it's very exciting.
It's funny how the science, I've noticed a lot of your work, we end up years later, science is now proving. It's like, yeah, we know. We've been saying it for a long time.
Yes.
It is funny how, so as you were talking, I was descending in my own experience because I thought that was really intriguing the way you were saying it. And immediately I was aware of the way my butt is on that chair, the fact that it's actually not feeling fully balanced.
Mm-hmm.
How just somehow, just the mention of it, I was able to immediately go and travel my inner village. So it's not that hard to get to, it sounds.
No, it's not that hard to get to. I think if you have some suggestions, some metaphors. I was remembering that when I used to practice as a therapist, there were two things that people would most commonly say to me. Is one was, I don't know how I feel.
Uh-huh.
And for that, I was taking feel to mean I don't know what I'm experiencing. When I give attention to myself, I don't know what's going on in there. And then the second one is I know what I'm feeling, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yes.
They thought that they'd have to do something about their sensations. And in fact, feelings, we now know, are really a bunch of sensations all grouped together. They're not any different than sensations. They're just sensations that move together, like, they move in a river together, or they move, up over your shoulders together when you feel angry. So I just loved the validation that giving attention to ourselves has value, and giving attention to our whole body selves rather than just our mind selves or our scrolling selves, scrolling through social media self, has immediate impact. And one of the things it can do is interrupt that kind of, like I'm feeling depressed. And so I look at things that make me more depressed. And then, I withdraw from contact with other people. And so I just loved having that another affirmation of how our bodies are our friends.
I love that. And it is interesting how even I was doing a class not long ago about, it's called emotional resolution. And a lot of the work had to do with describing our sensations.
Yeah.
And so without exactly doing what I didn't do, not doing exactly what I just did, which was to not necessarily attempt to change it,
Right.
not breathe over it. Like, people, the minute they realize they're stressed, they're like, oh. But even that is like trying to change and control the actual sensation. But to be able to be like, I have a little bit of a tightness in my chest and my shoulders are feeling a little bit tight. And the work that he was describing is that the minute you have two, you had to be able to identify two so that your brain was actually no longer able to speak to it or describe it, but rather only feel it. I don't know if it's making sense, but
Sure. Yes, because you get two of them and you drop out of the verbal and you
you
start
drop out of the,
experiencing.
that's exactly what would happen. You drop out of the verbal, and then your eyes would be closed, and then you would be just guided to be like, just do nothing, just do nothing. And you would notice, I started noticing that if it was a tension, not attention, it would start to resolve itself just by giving it a little bit of time and a little bit of attention. So it sounds like very aligned with what you just said.
Oh, and I'm so happy to hear that both people practicing, and really, like doing the research in the field with people, like how are you experiencing this? But also one thing that I've noticed, but I love the thing about having two. So almost always when I'm having people experience, I'll have them tune into, like notice some place that feels tight or dense, and describe that or describe it to yourself or notice it. And now notice a place that feels more spacious.
Yes.
And now let your attention go back and forth between the two of them.
Yes.
And so there are all kinds of ways of opening up this amazing treasure chest that we have inside us of our inner, what I call our inner landscape. And I love it that in this article they call it your inner wildness,
Even
your
better.
inner
Yeah.
wilderness, so that
Mhm.
there are discoveries there, that things that are popping up, that are not manicured or or controlled. And our tendency as humans, and particularly in culture, when we see something, we have such a what's wrong orientation.
Yeah.
No, what's the problem now? And so that immediately when something comes up, we think, I got to fix it. I got to get rid of it. I have to override it. So the what we call being, in Be, Play, Love, being is not a passive activity. It's very active, of presencing with something that's going on. And it has that the influence of dropping your awareness into your whole body wisdom rather than just your cognitive brain, which is a tiny part of your brain.
I was going to say, it's like, it's such an interesting thing that we do to ourselves, society has whatever we do to ourselves is cut off one of our senses. I mean, we don't treat it as a sense, really, like, vision or hearing or being able to speak. It's not exactly perceived that way. But what's going on inside is such guidance, it's such wisdom that if you're able to listen to it, it's like you've added a color to your paint, right? You've just been
Well,
able.
I think you've added a continent. You've added a whole, you're a pioneer in your own life. And a lot of scientists now call what we're talking about right now interoception.
Yeah.
So it's into yourself, perceiving inside yourself,
Yes.
which is which is another way of looking at it. But I it's okay to just say, noticing yourself,
Yes.
noticing what's going on inside you. And I think what gets cultivated from that, among other things, is what I call whole body thinking.
Mhm.
So that you're receiving and then processing with your whole body, not with your brain, which tends to be much drier.
Yeah.
Gay often would use the metaphor of a grapefruit, that the brain is like a grapefruit, and that the rind is like
Yes.
your cerebral cortex, but the juicy parts are where the juiciness comes from. And your cerebral cortex isn't juicy; it needs juice from your
Mm.
body to be able to really have things to play with. And the other thing that was from this article, it was so exciting, is that when you do this kind of sensory interruption of the doom scrolling mindset,
Yes.
it frees your brain to actually problem solve and to create. because so you're not in that, merry-go-round,
Yes.
and you do that without yelling at yourself and trying to stop yourself. Stop doing that. You
Yeah.
simply shift your attention, and then that opens up your brain, which I just think is fabulous.
It actually, it's interesting how when I don't experience it that often, but when I do feel fear, that thing that it's almost like your taste in your mouth changes. Like it's a
Oh yeah, it's kind of
physiological.
metallic. It can be
It has a
metallic.
that's exactly
Yeah.
right. It has a metallic. I do find myself not as smart. Like I will. It's almost like it's cut off my creativity, logic. I don't even know. Maybe my problem solving ability, but certainly like, oh, this didn't work. Let's try this other way. But when
Right.
I'm feeling this metallic thing, I can't seem to. I don't have the plasticity almost. Like I seem like I'm not as limber in my head, if that makes sense.
I that makes total sense, and of course, the research totally supports that. But your description is so useful that when I say to people, when you're in fear, you can't think. They go, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah." But when you're saying I get this metallic taste and it feels
Yeah.
like I'm shrinking, and so I think people can actually notice the what happens when I start to get scared or when I'm really scared. So, for example, I got in touch, a couple of months ago with something I'd never understood the term flooding. What does that mean when somebody gets flooded? And I actually had this experience with when I was taking care of Gay when he was, really, really sick. And I was doing a whole bunch of things, and he would open his eyes and come back from, a long nap and would have 5 or 6 things he'd like me to do right now.
Mm.
And I realized what I started to experience was a kind of like I'd been given too much liquid to drink, and I was kind of,
Flooded. Yeah, yeah.
and that also, it was as if my brain sort of turned to cotton candy.
Oh,
And so so what I did was I said, God, this is familiar. I don't know what this, but it's so familiar. And I was just with it. And then I uncovered, sort of one of the major traumas in my life where when I was 8 years old, my mother was pregnant and she was told to stay on bed rest. And so she asked me, an 8-year-old, to help her with things. I had an older brother who was 3 years old, 11. And no, she didn't ask him. She asked me. And so one of the things she asked me to do was to move clothes from the washing machine into the dryer,
Oh.
which I went down and I'd never done it before. So I had all these knobs and things. And so what I managed to do was to turn the washing machine back on again.
Right.
And so then I was trying to take things out. It would have been a great comedy sketch because I'm pulling things out and putting them in the dryer. And so my mother got out of bed to come down and
Ooh.
help me.
Mm.
And shortly thereafter, she had a miscarriage. And then the implication was always that it was my fault.
It was your fault.
And all of that had sort of gotten buried into this sense of
What are you going to
something
do? Yeah.
something bad is going to happen and I don't know how to fix it and it's going to be my fault. And the key to it though was really letting myself go into the sensation of flooding and give my awareness to it. And I had enough free attention that I could wonder.
Mhm.
And then it just followed down into, and all of a sudden, this whole episode popped up for me, which was so liberating. It allowed me to completely change my orientation. So when Gay would say something, I'd say, "Yeah, I hear you," and I'm got my attention on this, but I didn't get defensive or like, or like,
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no. So it allowed me to presence and also to take care of him while taking care of me. So and all of that came through sensory awareness.
Wow. It's striking me wondering with a lot of empathy for you in that moment. And also what happens to people that are not as versed as you are in that moment where you're able to hold this little girl and be able to be like, I'm here now, I'm with you, and be able to reprocess all these things. What do you have as advice, or what does someone do? Because I'm imagining that this memory coming up could be a really traumatic, a very painful thing. If
Well,
it's
what
resolved.
I realized is that it had come up repeatedly in my life, but I had never really identified it as a fear response, this flooding fear response, which I think is an aspect of fainting when I feel into it because I felt like I was sort of overcome and I didn't feel capable and my energy was draining away. But what really made the difference was being able to give my attention to what I was actually experiencing. So before I would jump up into my brain and I would flee forward into, oh my God, and I'm in trouble. And I would make up all kinds of stories about the other person, like if Gay could just give me one thing at a time. And so then I would get irritated. And so it would go off in a whole other direction. And one of the things I'm appreciating about this article is the the value of being able to give attention to yourself starts immediately. So
Yeah.
you don't have to know how to solve a really complex trauma like I did. And you got to remember, I've been practicing for lots
That's
of
what I was
years.
thinking. What
And
about us? What do we
yeah, what
do?
about us who are not? But what I was getting is that simply shifting to getting curious about, oh, what's this? And
Mm.
then and noticing what's going on inside me, it shifts it opens up the logjam.
It's funny how, I mean, I guess I often go there around food, but it reminds me of that is why I don't eat sugar. Because if I eat, I mean, I know it's a bizarre parallel maybe, but the way when I eat sugar, I can no longer stop it's like the horse is out of the barn, it's going 500 miles an hour. I can't seem to manage it. But if I do it, like what you're describing, the ability to sense the sensation right away feels like you're proactively not letting the machine just like because when you are full on in the traumatic experience, it's probably too late. You're
It's too
probably
late. You're on. You. I say that you're on the roller coaster and strapped in, and that's it. You're
and
on the
just let it
ride.
go because you're in. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then you need to recover afterwards. But what I think is so exciting, particularly that you're talking about sugar, because sugar, fat, and salt
Yeah.
is the formula for ultra processed food. And when people are
Yes.
eating ultra, particularly sugar, it is cocaine for your brain,
Yes. Yes.
and it just takes over your brain,
Yeah.
and it gives you that artificial sense of ah,
The
and then
cocaine.
and then the crash. So it's like adrenaline. You have that, oh, life is wonderful. Oh, life sucks. So the discipline to be turning your attention toward what's happening inside you, but supported by you actually nourishing yourself,
Yeah.
nourishing your insides, like with what you eat and what you're drinking and how you use your vision and whether you move and all of these things that we know assist your health. But the thing is, if you're not giving your attention to what you're doing, it doesn't really help. A part of this article was also about exercise, and that people doing a lot of exercise don't necessarily get undepressed because they're not letting themselves notice what they're experiencing while
Ah.
they're exercising. So what we call that is getting your mind in the meat, getting your mind in your muscles, so
Mhm.
that you're actually getting your consciousness following along with, oh, that one was a little quirky, or oh, I jumped that one. I'm going to just notice, oh, I just skipped my elbow altogether. I didn't even notice where my elbow was. All of those things really, it's like filling in a coloring book where you just have the outlines, but when you're giving your attention to sensations, you get the color and the
Mhm.
relationship and the dimensions all open up for you. And even a little bit makes a difference.
Unbelievable. We were playing pickleball a few days ago, and I noticed that it has a name, and athletic people really know about this concept where your ability, it's almost like as a car that would be fast. It's like, how does it go to 1 second, 60 miles an hour, whatever that thing they measure for cars?
Yeah, right.
It has a very powerful effect on how you're able to move. It's like, how fast can you get yourself in motion? And I was on
Yes.
pickleball court, and I was noticing that my guy, who's a marathon runner, 300x, so very good at like mobilizing, I guess is
Yeah.
one word. He is on the ball, like the ball arrives on our side, and his body is already in motion to get to that ball. Where I noticed, which is why I'm smiling, that the noticing alone was so powerful. I noticed that I didn't. Now I'm really applying it and playing with it, but I noticed that my ability to mobilize and go was delayed by maybe I mean, I don't know, very, very small amount. But that is what got me to not get to the ball when he gets to the ball. And so I'm
Yes.
thinking like just to enter the court with that awareness, like that one thing alone to like, how do I trust my
It's so, yeah, I know I'm excited too. This
I
is
know it's fun. It was fun.
the what I hear you describing is another one of the aspects of fear. So in flee, when I'm not actually with myself, I'm out ahead,
Yeah.
or up above, or
Yeah.
over in the other person. And when I'm giving attention to what I'm actually experiencing, I think it frees up that particular log jam. And what gets opened up is readiness, exactly the readiness that you're
Readiness. Yeah.
talking about. It's
Hmm.
that readiness that you could go in any direction because you're right there. You're not, you're not,
So
and it all it
present.
takes is a second because
Yes.
in really, really high powered sports, it's a tenth of a second, a hundredth of a second.
Yes.
And so anything that people can do to increase their alignment and their whole body power, I think that this is such a wonderful indication because we've been talking about this for ages, of the sensations are so much more important to you than your thoughts in order to really activate your whole body awareness and your whole body thinking and then that treasure chest then becomes available for your cognitive brain to work with.
I was going to say, thank you for saying that at the end, because I was going to say, it's not to say we shouldn't be thinking. Like I felt the sensation, but what was also interesting was the adding of my understanding of what was happening. That's what's beautiful is that there was a partnership between, oh, wow. Like I really am delayed. I'm delayed in my ability to move but then, oh, what does it mean? And like the combination of the two is really where
Yes,
I felt the juice was even more valuable to me.
I totally agree. And when I think a lot of people think if I'm going to be giving a sensation to, giving awareness to my sensations in my body and not leading with my thoughts, then I'm going to look kooky
Yeah.
or weird, or I'm not going to make any sense to people. But
Yes.
what we actually find is that there's a richness of communication that opens up. And first, the communication between your insides, because so many people really do think that they just live from their head up, that
Yeah.
the rest of the body is not important. It's just kind of carrying you around. And to have real data and actually experiments that you could start right now for yourself that you're adding to your ability to create, to problem solve, by using your own very simple body sensations.
That you
And they
have
can
with
get
you at
very
all times.
they can get very like a symphony,
Mhm.
because when you follow one it can open up something else, like as I was describing, opened up this whole scene
Mhm.
that I was still carrying the markers of,
Mhm.
almost 70 years later. So those things don't go away. They go into your system. And I experienced such liberation from being able to follow that and then being able to express what I had experienced. And then I could problem solve. Whereas before I couldn't problem solve when Gay would, need all of these things, I would just get overwhelmed,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is a faint response. And so it was really interesting for me also to see how all of these are related to fear.
I mean, maybe more lately. Do you think fear? It sounds like it's at the heart of everything. Like the way.
Well, that's my professional opinion
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
that it's at the heart of everything. But we've been so pickled in it. Speaking of pickleball, we've been so pickled in it for so many years now that I don't think people distinguish. They really think that's the water they're swimming in. And I think that's another aspect of giving attention to body sensations. It can begin interrupted the cognitive overlay and open up like little new windows and getting more fresh air in there so that the brain has more to work with.
It speaks to the idea too, when they say that what we're afraid of often comes from not knowing, like the unknown of what's about to happen, we start projecting, that it's not going to go well. It really would feed what you just described. Like, we don't know, like when you were saying earlier that as a therapist, people would be like, I don't know what I feel. Well, that's getting to know, right? That I would be afraid of my own feelings if I didn't spend time with them. And therefore,
Right,
I'm
because they're
justified in
unknown
being afraid of them because I don't know them.
right, and it's also like it's like a deep ocean and like, "Oh my god, what's gonna be in there?" And it's all dark and unknown and full of monsters, whereas when you actually dive in, there's this wonderland that opens.
There is I had a conversation a while ago with someone he's a scientist, people that are scientists, and they
Oh,
believe
yes, I do.
and I believe in science. Don't get me, I mean, whatever I understand of science, but I'm fascinated that science keeps changing its mind. Like something that was science 10 years ago is no longer. So it's like, why would I trust that more? Besides the point, he was telling me about the moon and how he had never been more interested in going to the moon and the whole thing of like going to the moon. And granted, I'm not from here, so I didn't really participate in this whole, we will have a man on the moon. Like that was such a big deal, right? And it probably is a big deal. But in my conversation with him, I was feeling like this is the moon, like this chest of mine, this feeling
Yes,
like this is the adventure.
yes.
I want to go out. Like I don't need a rocket to
Yeah,
get.
I don't need to go way out there millions of
No,
miles, but yes, that we are
we're
an
not the moon.
adventure, a new continent,
Yeah.
and to have that kind of curiosity and wonder about yourself. What a much better attitude. One of the other aspects of this article, it was very rich, is that your sensory experience can interrupt default programs that you've been
Yes.
running.
Like habits.
Like
Habits.
habits. Yes,
Yeah.
because it's much easier to start a new habit than it is to stop one.
Mm.
And so the giving attention to, oh, and how am I experiencing this? And oh, that's an interesting sensation. You're interrupting the default programs
Yeah.
in your brain and giving a new one, but in a very easy, non-confrontational
Right.
way that your brain, I think, can actually accept. And what it also did was just give total confirmation when I've been on interviews and people said, "Well, what's one thing that, like if partners are having they're having a hassle, what's one thing they could do?" And I said, "Well, first thing I would do is notice body sensations and describe those."
Yeah.
And because it opens up your own wondering, but it also opens up connection between you and another.
Well, yeah, because if I'm telling you my sensation, you can't, you have the beautiful word of
It's
they're non
unarguable.
unarguable. I love that word. It's like if I tell you my chest is tight, or you're not going to sit there and be like, no, I don't agree with that. Well, it's my
Well,
chest.
what I'd probably say is, "Oh, tell me more,"
Exactly.
because I go like, "Oh, your chest is tight," and so with clients, I've also said, is it tight? How is it tight? Like a rubber band, or is it tight like two plates of metal are squeezing each other, or is it tight like you can't breathe? And so we it takes me back to our descriptors. We just
Yeah.
need more descriptors. So tight is really helpful, but I consider that a beginning
Yes.
sensation. But for me, it would be I go, oh, so tell me more
But look
about
at what
that.
it did. You didn't feel blamed. My telling you that my chest is tight, it created curiosity. Like, what does it mean? Describe it to me. Like, it's almost like even if you were mad at me in that moment, are you mad at me in this moment? You're not mad.
No,
But you would go to like tell me more about this, and then you'd be able to say, well, that's interesting because my body is feeling this, and then we kind of go into your world, and there's no blame, no shame, no criticizing. There's nothing. It's just we just describing, and by doing that, you're right. We get back to our own heart. Like that's the route, that's the fastest route probably to be feeling my heart, because that's in the middle of everything, right?
That's been my experience, but to have that confirmed, by a big a
I
bunch of, I mean, this was a summary of a bunch of different research projects, was just so affirming that that our bodies, again, our bodies are our friends.
oh,
And we just learn in so many different ways that you and I have been talking about, for months, about how society does not want us to be friends with our bodies because then we're not good consumers.
yes. We won't be buying that one cream that's going to make this one thing
Right.
feel
This
like
one thing
better.
be better for now.
Yes, yes. Wow. I love this idea. What do you recommend? Like fear, we talk about it a lot, and I know it's part of your body of work, a big part of your body of work. I'm curious, not the exact, if I was 5 years old, what would you tell me? But a little bit, like when fear takes you, when does fear take you over? Do you let fear take you over?
Oh, it doesn't. See, we have this whole humans think that they're much more powerful than they really are.
Okay.
Like, because all of our advice about fear is to control it.
Not the
All
world.
of the
We
advice,
do. You're saying the world, not us. Not,
in the world, yes, not
yes.
us, you and me personally, but
Yes.
what the world teaches us
Yes.
is just push through, don't pay any attention to it, become
Yes.
fearless,
Keep moving.
which is impossible.
Yes.
And so we humans get these messages that that we shouldn't even touch fear or contact fear because it's just so, I don't know, dangerous or incomprehensible. But
Mhm.
I've found that fear, when I give my attention to fear, like,
Mhm.
oh, even just, oh, I think I might be scared, just that. And then how do I know I'm scared? So then I'm noticing different body sensations, or I feel one of the most common ones is just a little holding of breath, a little,
Yeah.
and on the in breath, that,
Yeah.
and that's in the, oh, I'm scared. And then, oh, what am I making up about what's going on right now? And
Yeah.
so it opens up presence for me in that moment.
That seems like an easy tip, right? Like that's right. I mean, sometimes people, because I feel like you and I, we've done a good amount of work around all this, and sometimes I lose a little bit of connection with people that have not been traveling these waters for so long. But I feel like this is an easy tip. Like right
It's
away, go to what is your body feeling right now? What is the
Yes.
sensation? Feels very doable. Very, very doable.
And then if you can describe it even to yourself, then that really amplifies the
Connection.
communication
Yeah.
from your senses to the rest of your brain, because your senses are what's giving fuel to your cognitive brain.
Yes.
And so the more you let them play and exercise and open up, the smarter you're going to get, but also the easier in your smartness. It won't be run by fear, but by curiosity.
Oh, I love that so much. It reminds me of that lemon exercise. I'm sure you've heard of that or done it, where I could describe to you the lemon in your mouth and how the juice goes between my teeth and how it creates it. It wouldn't take very long for you to start feeling like if you had a lemon in your, like, words
Yes.
are powerful, like what we say to ourselves, so powerful. So if we are letting fear, we feed the thing, and then this is going to happen, and then this, and then I'm going to be left all alone, and then I'm going to be homeless, and blah 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 blah. The body is like the lemon thing. It's like all of a sudden, it's like I'm scared. Like I would be scared if I didn't have a place to come home to, but
Yes.
that's not something that's actually happening.
Right. So we make it, when in the absence of sensory data, we make up stories.
Yes.
And then we believe those stories, and then we feed those stories and forget we have a whole body of sensation to support us.
Wow.
And so I just found it so encouraging, and and so for any of us who are, wanting to be more present here and feel more engaged and be able to choose more, giving attention to your body sensations and then describing them, whether it's on paper or, out loud, or just in your mind describing, oh, that was a different, like I've been able to describe different sensations when my throat was tight.
Yeah.
It's very different. Well, was it tight? Is it a lump? I'm feeling a lump. Oh, wonder if maybe I'm just pushing something down that wants to be expressed. Or it could be a grating, like, oh, I'm mad at somebody. Or, the sensations are a key to what's actually going on that most of us don't use. And when you use that, your whole experience can be so much richer and I think easier and more friendly.
What would you say is the opposite? We're close to closing, but I was sitting here for a second. What is the opposite of fear? When you're not in fear, what are you in?
Oh, I'd say the word that just came to me was engagement. I'm
Ah,
engaged. I'm well, participating is a kind of Latin word, participating,
yeah,
but engaged. As I'm flowing into me and into the environment, and I'm in motion.
I love that. I'm hearing freedom as well. I heard
Mm,
like I'm not in fear, I'm free.
mhm.
I feel like fear prisons me and
Yeah,
prisons me, right? When
yeah,
what you're describing of engagement to me right away, I feel the oxygen, I feel the liberty to
yes.
to be my own self. I love that. Oh, that's juicy. We're gonna have a lot of notes. We're gonna have notes about this article. Of course, we'll have the link in the notes. Thank you for finding this article. I
Oh,
love
well, thank my friend Kate who sent it to me because she said, you taught me this in 1984.
it. So there you have it. 40, what is this, 40 years later?
40 years. Yeah.
That's science is catching up. That's good.
Which I love
Oh, we
because
do, we do, we do.
we need, our left brains,
Yeah.
are there for a purpose, of having,
Yes.
let's be careful. Let's, let's
Yeah.
protect. And we need both the expansion and grounding. So I
Beautiful.
love it that they can work together.
Thank you. This was really super enriching. Thank you so much, Katie. I'll see you very soon.
Oh, thank you. Mwah.
Bye.